looking for Corporal Upham.
Yes, sir.
Timothy E.
I'm Upham, sir.
I understand you speak French and German?
Yes, sir.
How's your accent?
It's just a slight one in French, but my German's clean, has a touch of Bavarian, sir.
Very good. You've been reassigned to me. Grab your gear.
Hot take.
Watch out, it's a scorcher.
Saving Private Ryan is not a good movie. Dramatic pause.
I'll allow it.
It did not deserve to win the Oscar for Best Picture in 1998. Super hot take. Shakespeare in Love simply tells a better story. You may hate that opinion, but the beach sequence, you say, it revolutionized cinema, it made war real. I get it. The visual impact of Saving Private Ryan was immense. I remember wanting to crawl inside my shirt watching it in a theater. But it's not a good movie. And one reason why is that it's actually telling a narrative about a character that's not the protagonist. The protagonist, Tom Hanks' Captain Miller, has no narrative. His arc is towards death, spoiler. And there's not much else to go on other than he's a teacher turned super soldier who marauds with his company across the theaters of battle in Europe. He's noble, self-effacing, a stand-in for every American's idealized version of themselves and their history. He's a cipher. The character who actually changes, not Miller or Ryan or any of the squad of heroes, is this guy.
Hey, you want your head blown off, you fancy little fuck? Don't you ever fucking touch me with those little rat claws again. Get the fuck back in formation.
And what the movie cares to say about America, manhood, and war through this character isn't good. But don't take my word for it. Let's use an established academic's critique and see just how well conceived and forceful good criticism can be. Or, to put it more bluntly, just why anyone should take any of this shit seriously.
Why, indeed.
From this point forward, all criticism will be from Curtis White and his book, The Middle Mind, published in 2003. The subtitle is Why Americans Don't Think for Themselves. That should give you some idea where he's coming from. Here's how he starts that section on Saving Private Ryan. Quote, "The middle mind is able to accomplish its business in part, as I have said, because its assumptions have become so naturalized. In the world of the middle mind, all one asks of art is that it be entertaining, fun, interesting, and that's as it should be. Saving Private Ryan, for White, is a movie that is contemplated in precisely that way, because it is made by the consummate middle mind director, Steven Spielberg. He writes, this film has played an important part in the broad propaganda effort that legitimizes our current thinking about the necessity and usefulness of war in places such as Iraq. Yes, the Iraq War began in the spring of 2003.
In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
White then goes on to elaborate what he considers the film's lesson to be. Always choose death, for if you do not, death will come anyway, later, multiplied. White then drills down to the character of Upham and what he perceives as the audience's reaction to him, that he was a coward. His conclusion is that audiences perceive character constructs as real people, and thus do not know how to read a film. In his more jargony language, quote, audiences don't know how to abstract the integument of structure from a piece of narrative art in order to begin to talk about how the thing means, i.e. creates an ethical world. I had to look up integument. A tough, outer, protective layer. Okay, makes sense. White then frames a rhetorical question that gives his critique its reason for existing. What does it mean when the most sinister ideological notions pass virtually without comment in mass culture narratives? White is for sure a disciple of the Frankfurt School and capital C, capital T critical theory. More on that later. Now begins the reading. White starts by noting that the DreamWorks logo conflates Spielberg with Walt Disney through the image of a Huck Finn figure. This is apt since both are purveyors of middle-of-the-road fantasies for American audiences. Then, the flag appears, which White speculates is a reactionary device used to cauterize all of the wounding criticisms of American empire from the 1960s forward. The Vietnam era thus is overwritten by the World War II era. In the opening scene, the critical component of the mise-en-scène is not the old man, but his beautiful granddaughters in the background, which are framed in such a way as to answer his question about living a good life. Then, in the flashback that starts the story proper, we stare into the eyes of Captain Miller. White argues that casting Tom Hanks in this role was a very shrewd choice so as to soften the edges of the male warrior hero and subconsciously establish this film as a counterpoint to Vietnam narratives. Say, for example, this guy in Platoon. Let me also note that Miller, unthreatening and kind, is a more lucid restatement of Hanks's other war hero from 4 years earlier.
To do whatever you tell me, drill sergeant?
In critiquing Spielberg's famous staging of the D-Day invasion, White concedes that it is masterfully done, but nevertheless a glorification of violent death, which he calls America's super aesthetic. I would agree that in the film medium, this is a hard point to argue with. The war movie, as with the Western, are quintessential film genres for Americans. After the invasion, we get the setup for the plot.
Written a long time ago to a Mrs. Bixby in Boston. I've been shown in the files of the War Department a statement of the Adjutant General of Massachusetts that you are the mother of 5 sons who have died gloriously on the field of battle. We are going to send somebody to find him. And we are going to get him the hell out of there.
White dismisses all of this as a sentimental red herring that doesn't make much logical sense. So, red herring for what, you ask? For this.
What? What? I'm sorry, I can't understand what you're saying. What'd he say? What'd he say? Look, I washed for someone.
In actuality, this is the critical moment of the plot because it will be paired with others like it later on. In fact, here is the next one, in which the execution is aborted because of Upham's moral argument.
Ask this piece of shit if he's the one who shot Wade.
Sir, you're gonna let them kill him? This is not right. So, I'm not finished.
Yeah, that's what you think. Come on.
No!
Yeah.
Fine, but only found me.
I say, can you see? Das ist halt grün, nicht?
Captain, this isn't right. You know this. He's a prisoner. He surrendered. He surrendered, sir.
Tell him to march 1,000 paces in that direction. Then he can take off the blindfold, we'll be gone, and he turns himself into the first Allied patrol he comes across.
Here I will quote White at length because, well, it's kind of important. What allows Upham's argument to persuade Captain Miller is the fact that Miller is an intellectual like himself.
War educates the senses, calls into action the will, perfects the physical constitution, brings men into such swift and close collision in critical moments that man measures man.
Yeah, well, I guess that's Emerson's way of finding the bright side.
He is unlike Upham only in that he has, by force of brute will, obliged all cowardice from his own body, except for his symptomatically quaking right hand. This hand, foregrounded by Spielberg again and again, is synecdoche for the general cowardice of intellectuals. But Miller is bravely determined that he will not allow cowardice to dominate himself in particular. Synecdoche, which I always confuse for the other one, means part representing the whole, or vice versa. My editorial here is this. White, being an intellectual himself, would be keenly attuned to the relationship between Upham and Miller and what it means in a macho war context. So they let the German soldier go, which in a cosmically ironic way comes back to bite the squad during the climax of the movie.
Yeah, only if he doesn't get picked up by his own Wehrmacht first and then thrown back into circulation.
Here's how that scene plays out. The German takes careful aim at Captain Miller and shoots him dead with a sense of satisfaction in his face. While this is happening, Upham cringes in a crater, unable to use his rifle. White correctly notes that for an audience, the causal connection is immediately clear. Captain Miller must die as a consequence of Upham's lack of manliness. The word White chooses for the audience's reaction is contempt. If you've watched this movie, you know this feels right. We have certainly been manipulated into feeling this way towards Upham. But our feeling changes, because at the moment of Miller's death, Upham suddenly finds his courage and single-handedly and improbably takes the group of Germans prisoner. The German soldier from earlier in the film recognizes him and once again tries to ingratiate himself. But this time Upham is having none of it. Coldly and without any second guessing, Upham murders the surrendered soldier. In the logic of the film, Upham does what should have been done the first time. It's at this point that White makes his principal claim. This event was not ironic at all, but merely contrived by the filmmakers, director, and screenwriter to make a very simple, emotional point. Self-survival, the survival of the good, requires that one choose death. The cynicism and brutality of the first executions back on Omaha Beach are excused in their fact, if not in their style. White sums up the film's conclusion, which is the framing device of the old man asking, "Have I lived a good life?" while visiting the graves of Normandy, as a non sequitur. We now know this is Ryan, not Miller, and the only answer can be, how do we know if you lived a good life? What happened after you got back from the war? The only answer to be had is in the visually wholesome attractiveness of his family. White then provides an afterthought to his analysis, in which he brings in Adorno's dialectic of enlightenment. Ha! I knew he was a Frankfurt School guy. This dialectic happens in the movement between the universal and the particular. The universal, in this case, is the genre of the war movie. Quote, Mr. Spielberg feels bound by the law of genre to have rippling flags, heroes, and gut-wrenching spasms of patriotism. Genre, conventions, tropes are the universal element of art. On the other side, the particular, exists the boundless world of human possibility and play. The flag, and so much more in Saving Private Ryan, are not playful or spontaneous. They are abject. They are bent beneath the burden of what is expected and tolerated. Thus, White is making an aesthetic argument that what Spielberg produces, while entertaining, does not rise to the level of art, because he does not engage with the particular. For Adorno and White, art is successful in spite of the presence of convention and not because of it. Saving Private Ryan is a cultural product emblematic of an administered society, in which the craft of its making suggests the freedom of individuality while simultaneously prohibiting it through the pressure of the universal. And this conclusion makes a lot of sense for someone like Spielberg, who is easily the most well-known and successful film director of all time, meaning he trades strictly in the universal, the generic, at the expense of any personal, individual, artistic expression. Such blandness is the perfect market calculation to appeal to the broadest array of filmgoers. So, that's White's critique. Pretty good, huh? And to take a moment to critique the critic, I could make a few objections. One, White's engagement with the film within a larger argument about the middle mind of unthinking Americans comes across as a different script of the same story offered by someone like Harold Bloom, who wrote book after book about the importance of the white male literary canon, or even Alan Bloom's, no relation, Closing of the American Mind, a popular book of the time attacking the moral relativism taught in higher education. The term elitist to describe White is unavoidable, especially when considering he writes in a combative style that sneers at unthinking Americans. In terms of the analysis itself, I think his argument could be made stronger by including this character as a counterpoint to Upham. Private Jackson is deeply religious, but also an excellent marksman. who prays and kisses his cross before sniping enemy soldiers. In his embodiment of the Holy Warrior, we get an updated version of Sergeant York, Gary Cooper's conscientious objector. In this earlier film, York fuses his love of God into love of country and becomes a war hero by killing Germans. Although the film was based on a true story set in World War I, it was made and released right before America's entry into World War II in 1941, and very neatly served as recruitment propaganda.
Just like a flock of turkeys.
Jackson serves the same function, to make those who are naturally leery about getting too enthusiastic about war and killing submerge their moral consciousness inside of patriotic fervor. Jackson's lethal skill, exemplified in video game-style POV shots, complete with crosshairs and nameless, faceless enemies, washes clean the moral ambiguities of war by dispensing justice along the fault line of good versus evil. He is our righteous angel, and we must be on his side. Spielberg's composition of this character is a callback to an iconic moment in his first blockbuster.
Son of a bitch!
Another righteous man vanquishing monsters from the earth. Hey, if you like this content, please subscribe and like the video, and think about supporting the channel by becoming a patron. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching.